What's up, fam? Welcome back to the channel. For those of you who are new here, I'm Dan Ways. I'm a photographer, videographer based out of Chicago. I work professionally as a photographer at Ghost Energy / Lifestyle. I also shoot concerts doing both photo and video, and I love taking pictures of naturescapes and cityscapes. So now the real reason we're here is to talk about the Sony A7 IV. I've been using it for about 2 years at my full-time job, and I liked it so much that back in November of 23, I actually bought it for myself for both photo and video. So I figured I might as well give you all a review on it, my thoughts, pros, cons, a little bit of everything in between, and yeah, let's get into it. Prior to having the Sony A7 IV, I actually had the A7 III. Now, there are many reasons why I went with the A7 IV over the A7S or the A7R line. For those who don't know, the A7R line is geared more heavy on the photo specs, whereas the A7S line is the opposite, geared heavier on the video specs. The A7 line, however, walks right down the middle, taking a little bit of the video side, a little bit of the photo side, and it's mainly built for hybrid shooters. Now, coming from the A7 III to the A7 IV, the real reason I upgraded was for the spec boost. So some of the main specs that I looked at when I upgraded was the bump in megapixels, the 10-bit 422 video capture, as well as the S-Log3 and 4K video capabilities. Now, I actually had to clip the mic on here and use it how it's supposed to be used, I know. But so I could demonstrate, another reason is the fold out versus the flip out screen. So having this to where I can have the screen facing me when I'm recording, or if I'm taking a low angle shot, I can have it out like this, as opposed to just a flip out screen that kind of just tilts. So that was a big reason for me, and honestly, just I like shooting at a lot of low angles, so it is hard for me at times to really see the screen on the A7 III, but on the A7 IV with the swivel screen and everything like that, it actually makes my job a lot easier, and it also makes vlogging 10 times easier. I also love the addition of the hybrid switch, which allows you to go from photo to video to S&Q, and what's also great is you can create 3 custom modes within all 3 of those. All right, now let's talk about camera setup. For my personal setup, currently what I'm using is the Sony A7 IV with the Sigma 24-70 f2.8 on it. Now for my full-time job, I use the Sony A7 IV with the Sony G Master 24-70 f2.8 Mark II. I love that lens. It is super light. It's smaller than the Sigma. It's smaller than the Mark I of the Sony G Master, and it's just great. Have loved working with it ever since we got it. On top of that, I actually have the battery grip on here, which has been a lifesaver at times. Now I don't always go through the 2 batteries that it is. The battery life is great, but it is nice to have it on long shoot days and everything like that. I still carry batteries with me all the time, but the 2 battery setup in the battery grip is awesome. However, the only drawback to having the battery grip is it is going to make the camera a little bit heavier, but if you know that going in, you kind of get used to it, and honestly, if that's the only con, I'll take it. So let's talk about a few more things overall that I love about the A7 IV. Firstly, price point, we're coming in at $2,300, which for what you're getting out of this camera is actually a really solid price point. The next thing, obviously I had to talk about this because it's a Sony, and everyone with the Sony talks about it, is the low light performance. I shoot a lot of concerts, so I definitely needed something that's going to be able to perform well in those low light situations. Another thing is the autofocus. It's fantastic. Very seldom do I miss anything with the autofocus on. And again, the flip out screen. It's just something perfect for what I do. All right. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of it all. We're going to start with video specs. So I'm going to start it off with use cases. As I mentioned, I am a concert videographer, so I do need it to perform well in low light situations, which it does. I also use it for vlogging every day. Everything that I need it for vlogging, it handles perfectly. Another use case is the podcast that I run, and I'm going to shamelessly plug that. It's called the No Names Podcast. Go check it out on my channel. But what I'm getting at with that is I'm running 4K 24 S-Log3 outside, and I have never once had an error message saying that my camera is overheating. Sure, I might close a 45-minute to an hour-long clip with it being hot. It's been in the sun, everything like that, but I've never had it stop recording. And again, I'm going to touch on the custom modes. I actually have my 1 and 2 custom modes set for pretty much everything that I need. Both are set to shoot in S-Log3, but my custom mode 1 is going to be 4K 24, whereas the second mode is going to be 4K 60. Also with that 4K, you're going to get 422 10-bit color in S-Log3, which has been awesome. I've been color grading with S-Log3 for about 2-ish years now, and I love it. One drawback, however, that I've continued to run into is the 1.5x crop you get when you're shooting 4K 60. Now, it might not be the biggest issue for some, but when I'm shooting shows or anything like that, I'm trying to get a wide shot, it still crops in. So it is kind of annoying, and this is something that a lot of users have continued to talk about. Now, honestly, has it really held me back that much? No, not really. I can always work around it. I can move back. I can shoot with a different lens. I'll make it work. It's honestly more just annoying that I have to do those things instead of being able to do 4K 60 at a normal full frame. Now, if you don't want to shoot S-Log3, also has S-Cinetone, which a lot of people prefer as well. So really, when it comes to color grading, you're going to be able to do either, and I just prefer S-Log3. Now, another thing, if you are shooting an S-Log3, is you have dual base ISO. The base is going to start at 800, and the dual is going to actually be at 3200. Now, if you need something better than that, and you're really focusing on video, the A7S3 might actually be your go-to. Its dual native is going to be at 12,800. Now, if you're using it in a lot of very low light situations that like a lot of my friends who run the A7S3 are, that should be your camera if you're mostly doing video. So the last thing that I'm going to talk about on the video spec side actually might be one of the most overlooked specs on the video side, and that is focus breathing compensation. So what focus breathing is if your camera is trying to rack focus from front to back or back to front, see the camera, you're going to notice that there is not really any focus breathing or like jitters that you might get when your camera is really going from front to back to front, anything like that. So you notice that it compensates for the focus breathing that is happening in the corners of the camera. So it's not really going to be like super apparent. All right, next, we're going to be talking about the photo specs. So if you're like me and you're coming from the A7 III and going to the A7 IV, you're going to notice a bump in megapixels. The A7 III has 24 megapixels, whereas the A7 IV has 33. You're going to notice that you're going to be able to zoom into a lot of pictures and really not have too much distortion from the pixels. The quality is going to be there is what I'm saying. Now, this might not be as high as the A7R line, and if you are looking for something along those lines that's got a higher megapixel count, the last two models of the A7R have had megapixel counts over 60, which is great if you need something like that. Personally, I don't need something that high. The 33 that's in this camera gets the job done all the time. In the past, I have shot with an A7R line. I just can't remember if it's an A7R3 or a 4. Basically, what I'm getting at is the uncompressed RAW files there are gigantic. So if you're needing something that has a smaller megabit count on the RAW files themselves, I would probably gear more towards the A7 line as opposed to the A7R line. Your megapixel count on something between a 40 or even a 60 megapixel camera is going to be probably somewhere in the 100 to 120 megabit file size per RAW. So you're going to bog down some memory with that one. However, with the A7 IV, I'd say my uncompressed RAWs are anywhere between that 68 to 72, I think, megabit size. Honestly, it's not that bad, but it's still going to bog it down a little bit. On that note, I'm actually going to be talking about the cons that I've noticed when using this camera, and the first one is going to be the frames per second on the photo side. Now, I shoot uncompressed RAW, and if you're shooting, I don't know, sports or anything like that, you're probably shooting something a lot quicker. What I've noticed is the uncompressed RAW frames per second is actually 6, and that's pretty freaking slow. So when I'm shooting concerts and I'm just trying to hold down the shutter, trying to get one of those in-between moments, it just starts going do. At least that's what it feels like. It's a little bit faster than that, obviously, but it's definitely slower to some of the other cameras that are of this caliber on the market right now. However, again, if you are shooting something like compressed RAW or JPEG even, you are going to get the faster frames per second. You're not going to be able to get the most out of it that you would with an uncompressed RAW, which is why I shoot, so I can have the most capability in terms of editing. I can pull the most out of the image itself. Now, another thing I already mentioned is the 1.5x crop on the 4K 60, and there's actually not a 4K 120 option. However, me personally, I just don't need it. The 4K 60 gets the job done even with the crop. 4K 120 would just be overkill at that point. But if you do need this, I would obviously recommend an A7S line or just a different camera in general. Again, personally, I just don't need it, and 60 gets the job done. And that's really it on the con side. Like I said, I love this camera. It has been a blast to shoot with, and I will continue to shoot with it for a long time. However, I'm going to wrap this up a little bit and kind of give my final thoughts on, whether I think you should buy it or not, and whether I think it's still worth it in 2024. So first, obviously, as I mentioned before, is the price point coming in at $2,300 for the body. Really, in this price point, this is going to be one of, if not the best bang for your buck cameras. It's walking right down the middle of the photo and video side. The hybrid nature of this camera is going to help you in so many ways if you're trying to do both photo and video, which a lot of creators now are. And if you couldn't tell by now, I think the video is great. I think the photo is great. And the ability to do both very well is why I would definitely recommend this camera. Now, don't really get it twisted. It's not going to overwhelm you with both. There are obviously other cameras out there, even like if you look at the A7R line or the A7S lines, they're going to be specialized in either photo or video. So if you're looking to just do one of those things very well, as opposed to do both of them like pretty well. I would recommend going with something that's a little more specialized. However, if you're a hybrid shooter, this is going to be your camera because it allows you to do both at a very high rate. So if you made it this far and you enjoy this video, give it a thumbs up, comment down below if there's anything else that you want to hear from me, anything you're interested in. Make sure you're subscribed, and I will catch you in the next video. Peace.